All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Kristen Kambenzi,
Here.
Glenn Sarka,
Here.
James Hewitt,
Here.
Jennifer Cliff,
Here.
Jennifer Ray,
Here.
Cheryl Maddox Smith,
Here.
Jason Zajunik,
Here.
All right, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Support.
All right, motion made by Mr. Hewitt, support by Ms. Ray. All those in favor? I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of November 6, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of November 6, 2023.
Support.
All right, motion made by Mrs. Klipp, support by Mr. Hewitt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to business. Mr. Sedgwick?
Thank you, Mrs. Kambenzi. So I wanted to give the board a little bit of an update on enrollment. So I think the board has a pretty good understanding of head count versus FTE. Those aren't necessarily the same thing. We have some kids that are on partial schedules. Father Marquette, we only get a portion of for FTE. So this year's fall head count was 3,250. That's up slightly from last fall, 3,247. However, the FTE, 3,204 and some change is slightly down from the fall, 3,213. It seems it's really a reflection of a difference in Father Marquette. Their head count went from 120, or is at 120, down from 131. And when you do the calculation, our total MAPS head count is therefore down from 3,370 down to 3,370 from 3,378. Our FTE now 3,207 down from 3,216. So I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you. The reality is we're down slightly for FTE, but not down nearly as much as projections indicated. So good news, not great news, but still good news considering the trends that we're seeing in birth rates. And I did look up, I don't remember if it came up when we talked about enrollment before. It's come up in conversation. Our total FTE for non-resident students is 435. So that's a pretty good chunk of our population that are coming to school of choice. Any questions on any of those numbers? I got some other documentation here that I brought in case specific questions came up. Specifically non-residents from other districts, but didn't know that was going to be pertinent. So if there's no other questions, I will move on to the second item on the agenda. Previously, Mr. Lampman had presented a budget that included a stipend for our MAP staff, similar to what we had provided previously, and wanted to propose to the board that we follow course from last year and give a stipend to our staff. We have some calculations for this as well. It was a $500 stipend. $500 stipend prorated by FTE for all staff excluding Mr. Lampman and myself. And because of the way our FTE are set up, particularly for some of our hourly staff, anybody 0.75 FTE or above would get the full 500. We would base the determination on whether they were to receive the stipend. It would be essentially whether or not they were employed at MAPS as of the board meeting when the decision would be made. We can't make that decision tonight, obviously. I'm just posing it to the board so that decision would be based on whether they're employed as of December 18th, our next board meeting, and it would be paid out the December 29th payroll, which is the last payroll of the calendar year. We would include some of our long-term subs, roving subs, our regulars, if you will, and then it would essentially cover all staff that are full-time. So any thoughts on that? And I do have a calculation here. I'm gonna throw out the number 235,000 for the total cost. Nope, 213,000 would be the approximate cost based on what we have now already. We got some data to support that from previous stipends that we've issued.
What's the per employee for less than 0.75 FTE?
It would just be the, whatever their percentage is, that FTE. If it's 0.5, it'd be 250. Any other questions? You guys are easy.
I did have a quick question in regards to the non-resident students. Do you have an idea of geographic pull? Is that Marquette County? Do we have individuals from outside of Marquette County as well?
That's a great question. I would have to check on that. I guess I would be surprised other than Alger County. And because of some of the services we provide, particularly in special education, I could imagine maybe Alger County, but I'm not aware. I would have to check on that.
Okay.
I do have some of the breakdown as far as whether they're in other public schools or private other providers, but I do not have anything that goes beyond Marquette County. Hold on a minute, let me see here. I'm gonna go off the cuff here a little bit. So I do see Autrain and Noda on here. And we have a whopping one student from Autrain and Noda, and that's the only one just in a quick scan that would be non-Marquette County. And that's kind of what I would expect is, and that's special ed. Actually, there's 5 students that are general ed and the one that is special ed. So a total of 6 from Autrain and Noda. And that would have been the one I would have expected that would be non-Marquette County. I'm guessing you don't have anything on the ready for that topic, but we could certainly look into that more if you wanted.
That's, if it's not available, it's not terribly burning, but we'll, just was kind of curious as to where all those, it's quite a few students, so I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, we have a all other non-resident, which could be capturing any of those kids that are coming from outside Marquette County, but there's really no way of knowing that based on this metric, although this one is broken down by public schools. When I see all other, I think that might include private schools, charter schools, things of that nature. So
I think historically that might be slightly up. I mean, it's usually always averaged around 10%, but that's like a little over 12, so.
the 400 and, I had that number.
35.
435.
435. Yeah, I think that is up slightly. I found some interesting information that I'd be happy to send the board. It's an article from Bridge Magazine, and it breaks down essentially every public school in Michigan and shows you the rates, whether districts are increasing or decreasing in enrollment, and then it also includes school of choice numbers. And I scanned that. That just came out today, actually. I scanned that, and it was favorable for MAPS, certainly within Marquette County. I focused on Marquette County, and although overall the population, as we all know, has declined, I think we've remained very strong. So I'd be happy to send that article to the board. You might want to scan it. Just throw some numbers out at you. I guess I do kind of have it in front of me because I was just looking at it today. So our enrollment, this is comparing from 2012 to 2022, so about a 10-year span. Our enrollment is up 3.4%. That was surprising. Students who live in the district, our population, if you will, is actually down 2.3%. So that tells you right there that the school of choice, it would be making up the difference. The students staying in the district is up 0.8 percentage points. Students from other districts is up 3.8 percentage points. Students leaving to charter schools is down 2 percentage points. And students leaving to another district is up slightly 1.1 percentage points, which seems like it would conflict with the other number, but it's right off of Bridge Magazine. I'm sure they're tapping into the school's data system to get those numbers. So overall, I think we're doing quite well based on my analysis.
You may have mentioned this, but just for clarity's sake, or maybe I made it up in the last 5 minutes. Was there some mention of how many of our out-of-district school of choice kiddos were identified for services? I mean, are we seeing an influx because of the depth and of our special ed services?
So I do have some metrics on special education. I wasn't necessarily looking at whether we have more leaving or coming, although my gut tells me we have more coming than going because of the services we offer. We have quite a menu of services, especially compared to smaller districts. The special ed FTE that I see in front of me is roughly 10.6, which is only non-residents. That's only non-resident special education. And when you looked at the non-resident numbers that we said earlier, 430, that seems like a really small number, but that's what I have in front of me. So it would perhaps beg the question of whether or not we do have more coming than going. Again, based on our percentages, we're almost at 20% of our students are special ed, which is very high. So
I was just kind of looking at trying to get an idea of, obviously we're a draw, and just trying to get an idea of what that magnet is that's getting that number to be quite high. If you have a general idea about it, not holding you to any numbers or anything like that, but.
I also wonder, Mr. Sarka just kind of made a comment, made me think. I also wonder if we're getting school of choice because we have some families that can't afford current house prices in the city of Marquette, but their children maybe have started, and so they're moving to Negaunee or, Ishpeming, but not willing to pull their kids out of the MAP school system.
I would definitely agree with that. Not necessarily school of choice, but the other trend I've seen is we have families with school-aged children who are working remotely. So they live in Marquette, and they wouldn't be accounted for in the birth rate projections that we look at, but obviously would help our numbers, help us beat the trend, so to speak. Yeah, I've suspected that. Now I've actually, I have some anecdotes from talking with families that fit that profile. So the third thing that I wanted to talk about is our policies. We're going to have to review some policies in the near future. It's been a while, and the committee of the whole setting would be a slightly different venue for having that conversation, but I think we need to get that started. And we're finding that with Troon being the attorneys that we work with almost primarily, certainly primarily, almost solely, we're finding that we're needing to purchase Troon policies on a case-by-case basis. We're a retainer client, we get a discount on those policies, but it's still quite expensive, and the legal fees are significant as it is. The policy fees maybe aren't as substantial as the legal fees, but it is somewhat cumbersome when we're dealing with our attorneys and they're looking up our Neola policies to help us make decisions for any number of policy-related questions, and there's been quite a few. So, in the latest package of policies, Troon did send a proposal for buying their entire policy service. Ms. Hopper included a handout you should have something in your packet from Troon that essentially is the order form for purchasing those policies. For roughly $16,000 and some change, we could purchase the entire policy service from Troon. We would then be a policy holder, and then for about $2,750 a year, we would also be able to keep those policies updated. The change is going to be pretty substantial, making that full conversion. I'm not sure, we're going to be able to get that all done in the near future. I would advise that at this point we purchase the policy, again $16,000 and some change, and then I would schedule a meeting with Troon to actually develop a transition plan, if you will. There's some policies we're going to want to adopt right away from their package, and there's other policies that I think we're going to have to take a closer look at as we compare to the Neola policies that we currently have. But at least if we have purchased the Troon policies, I think it would be much easier to make that transition. And I actually already have a meeting. I wanted to wait until after this conversation, but I've essentially forecasted a meeting with Troon, and they have an attorney that's willing to work with us to make that transition, to come up with a plan on moving from being a Neola policy holder to a Troon policy holder. I know that some local districts, Marisa and Escanaba, both have made that transition. At this point, it just makes sense instead of nickeling and diming, so to speak, with specific policies based on specific issues. Just go ahead and make the transition, and then we don't have to worry about whether or not Troon is using their own policies to advise us.
Yeah, I personally think that it would be a heck of a lot easier to go that route. As someone who's been on policy for quite a while, 9 times out of 10 we go with Troon's policy anyway. I just think that they do a little bit better job. And it would give Mrs. Hopper a little bit less work too if we're just going through one policy instead of 2.
Additionally, if we already have them on retainer for legal, that seems a lot more streamlined than having all these disparate parts, and it is tricky with the wording. So I completely agree with President Kim-Benzie. I strongly recommend we follow through with that.
And if we identify those policies that need to be changed right away, then what we can do is schedule, we can break it up into 12 different chunks and just go through and modify the policy through the year as long as they're not pressing, and we can go with the old policy. That way we're not having to throw everything into one meeting, because I'm sure there's policies that can wait a few months and we'll get around to them. And also, that's a good way for us to learn the policies and to do it bite-sized pieces.
Anything that can streamline or, and create efficiencies, and particularly with the way things have been and the usage of them lately, I think that would be kind of more efficient and also just beneficial for that relationship. It strengthens the relationship as well.
A little bit of front loading, more upfront costs, but in the end, I think we'll see cost savings over the course of time. I think Mrs. Hopper and I agree that that's a good move, and as long as the board supports, the price tag is well within my authority to decide upon, and I can move forward with that without having to wait for the next board meeting. But I wanted to make sure I gave you a chance to provide input before I made that change. And that is all I have this evening. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the rebranding process. So, I think I gave everyone a folder, and it's just, I had a little time on my hands. And so I just put in all of the names that we got from the SurveyMonkey and just kind of tried to make it a little bit more user-friendly, alphabetized it. Tried to put everything together so that you could kind of see like some of the trends and the names and such. And I tried to go through and separate if there, because we had a few people that when they did their suggestions, they put in multiple names in there, since we had it that you could just submit once. So there was some overlap. So I think there was right around 2,000 suggestions. Obviously not all different names, but just about 2,000 suggestions. So now that we have the survey closed, we have all of the names submitted on SurveyMonkey in front of us, and then there was a few that we got email, snail mail, phone calls that we could still plug into this list, but a lot of them overlap, I think, from what I saw. Now the question kind of is, where do we go from here? So, because we have all these suggestions, it's just trying to figure out what is going to be the best way to narrow it down to maybe a more usable list, to try to figure out what the next nickname for the high school is going to be. So, open to suggestions.
The last time we met, we had talked about taking, well, first of all, I guess before I even say that, how many, I see, you know, we have some cases, a few of these where we have multiple columns, right, just goes on and on and on. I think you had said that the biggest one was over 300. One of the largest submissions was...
Yeah, one of the suggestions had 308 times it was suggested. There was another one that was 100.
Do you know how many suggestions in total there were? Did we have...
Different ones, they're all.
Yeah, I mean, are we looking at 300 and... Did Excel tell you that by any chance?
It did not.
Okay, so this would be a count. We had talked about, you know, dividing it up in chunks of 15 or 20 and taking it to advisories, roughly 30 advisories. I just think that's a really great way to get specifically the students involved without, again, putting the onus and responsibility on those kids. And we know that there's going to be, you know, maybe some kids that aren't comfortable participating, so I don't think, and I think we can count on teacher discretion for not forcing that issue. But to narrow this down, I'm ballparking here, but it looks like there's well over, you know, 200 or 300 individual suggestions, even though there are multiples. And maybe narrowing it down, somebody more mathy than I would have to do this, but narrowing it down to a list of whatever is decided. And then there was talk, and I'm pretty sure this was at the last committee of the whole, then taking that list of, you know, whatever our number is, whether it's 50 or 25 or whatever, doing a non-comment, one vote, maybe just run it a week SurveyMonkey to get it down to whatever, again, we determine the board will have to choose from. That just seems like a really balanced approach for having kids and community be involved. Obviously, you've said it several times, President Cambenzi, that you've been very excited at how many people participated in this, either through SurveyMonkey or snail mail or email or whatever, and it is really exciting to see how much the community contributed. But that just seems like a nice, gradual, and collaborative approach to that.
I agree with that. The only thing I would say, modify that is rather than sending it back out to the community, I'm worried about, again, throwing in an event survey kind of, we made that before, where we're looking at popularity and, solely at popularity. And, I think getting it to the 30 advisories. Getting it to the advisories is important. We'll have to take off several of the names that resulted from either drinking games or late night parties of some sort, or were part of the rules. We'll take those out, and I think that'll narrow things down and then build some excitement towards the release of the name.
Well, and I think to get away from the popularity, they narrow, they take, depending on how many there are, and, we do the math, but if they've got 30 names or 20 names in front of them, they come up with 4 or 5, so that they've got a few choices, not just one that they have to walk away with.
I guess I agree with that. I guess what I'm saying is once the advisories do something, then we may just kind of go from there, because we've gotten kind of the community input. We get the specific student input, and
Right.
we're left with a decision to make at that point, rather than sending it back out, because I would take up a lot more.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and it's one thing that Mr. Hewitt had mentioned before, that we don't necessarily want this to drag on forever. And while it would be great if after every time we got it down a chunk that we throw it back to the community, we don't want to be discussing this, months from now either. Because I think that, while it's not necessarily causing problems right now, I think that the longer it goes on, the worse it could be.
And the sooner the kids have something.
The sooner the kids have something to rally around, the better. So, yeah, I think if we can do one pass with the kids,
My only concern about that is, and this is a very, probably a selfish concern on my end, we'd have to get the metrics right, because I can't really imagine, what do we do with the list of 50? What is that list that we're going to be, however that's done, however that's shaved down, what is the number that's going to be considered, by this body? I think you had stated at our last committee of a whole, like there were some that I had never thought of that were kind of interesting. But to just, to get this down to a number, to maybe 25 or 50, and then expect the body to choose from it seems quite randomized. And so I want to make sure that our final list that we choose from is supported, has enough support behind it. Does that make sense? I don't know how, it could seem very or I would feel it is very, very random to have a list, if it's pared down from this many from the advisories to anything really over 15. It just would seem, I would feel like I was kind of throwing a dart at a wall and just seeing what stuck.
Well, one thing, Mr. Sedgwick and I met with Mr. Wheeler, and we were kind of just talking about, like, if we did send this to the advisories, like, what it could potentially look like. And, at first it was kind of like, well, maybe we just do a silent vote. Like, everyone just, it's on the computer, here's your list of however many names you have to, and you just vote for your favorite. And then we thought maybe it would be better to do something more interactive, like maybe almost like a bracket. Like if you're, where you would have, 10 names on one side, 10 names on the other side, get to the final one or whatever as an advisory, so that then you're dealing with, I think there was 44 advisories or something like that in the high school. So you'd end up with 44 names at the end of it. And so then it would be a little bit like the students would have to kind of amongst themselves, go through the different names to come up with their top one.
We could do the brackets. That sounds like at least fun,
Well, yeah, and
It's
then
not
that's
hard.
something that, honestly, the board could do. We could have the 44 names or however many names, put it on a big bracket. Okay, let's sit here and talk about some of the names and what we like, what we don't like. I mean,
Yeah,
That's a great idea.
I kind of like the board idea of that aspect more than the students. Again, the one of the major concerns I think we've all shared is that we want it to be exciting, but we don't want there to be students, pitting, things against one another, causing it to be an issue. That's why one of the ideas I had mentioned, which, again, I know I struggle to find a way to have it be super exciting, but I thought one of the most, I guess, fair and least amount of pressure methods may be like what you had already mentioned, which is, you randomize whatever we sort this 2,000 number list down to, weed out the ones that, don't qualify, or maybe just have one submission, versus, one that had, multiple. However, we pare that down to then, again, based on the number of advisories, come up with an even list, randomized, and when the students arrive in class that day, they don't know what 30 to 40, names they're going to be seeing. They pop up, they choose whether it's having in classroom discussion about, coming to consensus on a top 2 to 3 or 4, or whether it's a, private survey that's done on the Chromebook in order to choose your top 3, in order to pare that down even further. Then you don't have the, hey, I know this list of 30 going into class today, and I'm going to, talk with my friends, and we're going to vote for this, or,
Yeah, I mean, that was the idea, that we would still have just a blind draw for the names, and that each advisory would be different from the other, so you wouldn't have them politicking to try to figure out, well, you guys got to pick this name.
Right. Yeah, and that's what even though I love, sports and brackets, but how do you quote unquote seed, one of these nicknames against another one? What if you had the 2 most popular ones ended up in the same bracket, and then, they have to knock one another out? That kind of struggle with that one, having the students being involved with a scenario like that.
So, in summary, do I hear that we're thinking randomized list, maybe taking out, the one name that's only had one submission, randomized list of whatever that mathematically ends up being with 44 advisories, no bracket, consensus from each advisory for one, and then sort of the idea of the bracket, because I do like the bracket idea, and it's visual, so the community can see. Maybe the bracket notion for the board, is that kind of what we're thinking? Is that what your suggestion was, Mr. Hewitt?
Yeah, I think if that sounds to be the most transparent, I guess, in my mind at this point. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like that idea. I think that doing a bracket for the board, because we'll have seen all the names, and
Right.
and
Yep.
we can kind of, although I suppose you could have the same issue where you have 2 of the top names end up being in the same.
That's fine. I don't mind us having, to have that discussion, and having, whatever. But I didn't want to necessarily, that was what we were trying to avoid, was having,
With the
right, the
students.
students,
Yep.
Yep, agreed.
Mr. Zdenek, you're kind of quiet over there. Thoughts?
Nope, I'm good.
I know you guys are, I understand the principle of randomizing, but could I just ask, would there be harm when you set up those roughly 30 names per advisory? Could maybe, there be a way to have the list be somewhat intentional, in that, let's say you have 5 categories, and we just make sure they have a smattering of each of those 5 levels of, we won't call it popularity, but you could create lists based on a more widespread sample for those more potentially appealing names, rather than just a pure random list where you're going
Right.
to run the risk of having two
Right.
really good names in the same group, you
Yeah.
could somewhat,
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, we have,
Structure that.
I'm sure there's at least 40 different names that have multiple
Votes. Yeah.
votes, you know, in our list. And so if you make sure that each of those advisories has at least a couple in each thing, and then some of the ones that got, you know, 3 or 4 votes mixed in.
We don't want one advisory to have all the Rs. That would be a nightmare, I think.
Yep.
That would be one powerful advisory though, man.
How do we pare this down prior? Because I don't want that being on one person's shoulders and then people being accusatory of things. I mean, I want it being transparent, so I'm not sure how to pare it down prior to giving it to the students.
Suggestions?
I don't know, maybe we'd have to have a
Special
special
meeting?
meeting or a subcommittee meeting between now and the next board meeting.
Agreed?
Yeah, I mean, we could do either a special meeting or a subcommittee meeting, and
And then we share the ones that were removed. You
Agreed.
know, we have a
Like
list and say these were taken out.
yeah, because I mean, there's definitely some names in here that are not suitable for work.
Right, well, exactly, and I think we could vote on the ones that we take out, or however that, so that it's a board decision that those that have been removed, you know, that we all are supporting the team, you know, the folks who did the subcommittee, so that it is, we're kind of united on that.
I would also recommend, whether we're going to call it a formalized subcommittee or not to put any more work on one individual, but I do think of Mr. Wheeler as being, you know, he is the head of that particular building, and he is probably the most unbiased person that we could think of to help create, right? I mean, he has not been here, he doesn't have a dog in the fight, so I would hope that we would include him on whatever discussion and how to pare that down for certain.
I'm not sure if I want to involve anybody else outside of the board. I appreciate the idea, but, you know, with this being very divisive still, very controversial, you know, again, I don't want to, I just don't know how fair it is to bring others in there, you know, based on, you know, you go to some of the news stations, you know, most of the stories get 2 to 3 comments, and you go to the school name and it's 400 to 500 comments. So again, it's going to be a contentious issue, and I'm concerned about involving. Otherwise, I enjoy the most diverse output that we have available, and any input that we can get. But again, my concern is that, you know, it is going to continue to be divisive through the process. So again, I'm just concerned about involving anyone else, and then potentially having people in the community, you know, or, you know, there's going to be things there, and then, you know, the board has put us in this position on that split vote, and that's where it needs to move forward on. So.
Are you referring to Mr. Wheeler or the kids?
More from Mr. Wheeler, if we were
Okay.
going to get some input from the kids. Again, I think it's just very important that it's sent out, whether it's on an email where, you know, I'm assuming each of the kids have the ability to receive an email, I would assume, and that if we had the opportunity to have a randomized response where they don't have a name attached, and there's no way, or, you know, we can just get the information sent out. But again, I'm just very cautious about including other individuals in the process. Again, I appreciate the input, but I just, you know, I know it continues to remain a divisive process, so.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been, I think, pretty careful about making sure that it is mostly on the board and not drawing in anyone else, to just make sure that, you know, if people are upset, that they're upset with us.
I think Jason brings up a good point, though, about Mr. Wheeler. I think maybe keeping him out of the mix. He is new here and completely unbiased. While that's not untrue, you know, we certainly don't want to put any onus on him or any of the divisiveness on him. So yeah, I like it better more on the board.
I couldn't agree more. I just have to go back to this. A lot of times decisions are made without input from the people on the ground. And so when I make reference to Mr. Wheeler, I certainly don't want him to own the final 50, but what we think oftentimes is a good idea, I just feel like I'm trying to eat this thing. What we feel like is a good idea and makes sense sometimes just doesn't look that way with boots on the ground. So I certainly don't want to, you know, if we're talking about a list of 3 or 5 or 10, that's a lot of heat to put on any one group, and I think we've been clear that we're going to absorb that. But when we're talking about a list of 50, I think that's a little bit different. I want to make sure that whoever is at the, you know, head of this, to Mr. Zedundik's point, certainly thinking about maybe anonymity for students while giving them input, but I don't want to give a directive to a building about how things should go. If it was an issue of 5 or 10 or even 20 names, but we're talking about paring down over 2,000 responses down to 44, and that's.
You're talking about logistics, though,
I'm
not
talking
decision making.
Thank you.
That's
That's
the
a great way to say it. I'm talking about the logistics, not the decision.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, that's right.
So should we look to do small group discussion, or like maybe we can only have 3 in a group, but we could have multiple groups maybe, or just one group of 3, because we can't have a quorum. Can't have 4.
I think I'm still confused. Why?
To help whittle down this stuff to a list.
So the first step is to eliminate those that don't qualify because of the
Right.
rules or
Or
because
inappropriateness.
they're inappropriate.
Correct.
And being totally transparent, so that's why we would be doing a subcommittee kind of thing.
Right.
Unless we just did a special meeting where everyone could make it, but I don't know if everyone can do that between now and 2 weeks.
And what would this?
I mean, if we did a special meeting, I mean, I suppose if we had our list like we have right now, it could be like, okay, number 1.
So I think the
Good.
purpose of the meeting would be, yeah, just removal of anything that's not deemed appropriate.
Right.
And then sorting, right? So maybe we would also have to say, all right, the ones that are surviving that are deemed appropriate, let's start splitting them out. And maybe we have categories of, you know, highest number of submissions, maybe, you know, however we want to split those up, but we start kind of putting them in buckets. And, but yeah, we're probably not going to, that committee wouldn't be getting down to 44, we'd probably be getting it down to, you know, 200 or
Well,
250.
right, and then the
then it goes
students'
to-
advisory is what gets them down to
Yeah.
44.
Yeah.
Yeah, or however many advisories,
Right,
yeah. So we want to try to do a special meeting then to go over the names?
Like, I'll just mention this too for transparency's sake as well. I don't know if the rest of the group would agree or not, but I guess again, we can leave it for the committee, but I'll just throw out something that came to my mind on some of these. You know, there are a few, actually quite submissions that had more than one, maybe 20, 30 that suggest things like mountaineers and miners. And again, personally, not that they're not good names or have reference to it,
teams
but
we
they're
play
teams
against.
that are in the UP that exist, right? So I mean, I would like to strike those kind of from the get-go. That's just one example, you know. But
You think that Ishpeming Hematites is an inappropriate name for the Marquette
I
High
think,
School?
yeah, it might be a little, yeah, difficult.
Well, and
to-
what do we even, like, I think about, when we have a submission here for the 49ers, legally, that one's got to be struck. Wouldn't we be,
Well, it'd be the Marquette 49ers, but.
I suppose,
Yeah, I don't know if that would
yeah, good
be a
point.
trademark issue or not, but
I think maybe when we get a final list, we can run it through a trademark
Sure.
search to make sure we don't have any problems. I think that should be fairly easy at that stage, but maybe at the back it's a shorter, maybe a shorter list.
I don't think it would take us long to do this if we have, you know, a special meeting and whoever can make it, can make it.
I agree, I like that.
Yeah, I'm
And-
fine with that.
So do we have Linda, do we decide on the meeting date right now, or do we have Linda send a poll and we get back to her about
Oh, that's a good idea, Jeff.
over the next?
Yeah, a poll's probably easier, because then we can all make sure we have our calendars in front of us.
Great.
I need my refrigerator so I can see the family calendar. So we'll plan on setting up a special meeting to discuss weeding down some of the names to pass them on to the advisories.
Does a special meeting, if we label it a special meeting, I guess this is really a question for Ms. Hopper. If it's a special meeting, then we don't have to worry about how many people attend, or do we still need to limit it?
Special meeting is the same as a regular meeting.
Yeah, we could have all of us.
Meet all the open meeting
Yep.
notice requirements and, yes. You're
Yeah,
able to
and so-
vote. That's the difference between these committees.
Yeah,
You'll be
could-
able to vote at a special meeting.
Yeah, because we cannot vote at the committee of the whole.
Sure.
And so we could have a special meeting with just the rebranding as the topic, and then that would just be all we would do. Okay, so I think we have a semi-plan there. So we're gonna move on. Is there any other business anyone wanted to talk about while we're here? I think with pay to play, we're still waiting for some more information on the scholarship aspect, I think.
Correct, yep. So just essentially the best mechanism to be able to not only reduce the pay to play, to bring us more within those median guidelines for, you know, approximately the 40% of the schools surveyed on the MHSAA poll that do charge for extracurricular activities. What that mechanism is that can be reasonably included. Also, how, if possible, to include that or extend that to other extracurricular activities as well. If again, it seems like it's an easy thing to do, and it would be if we just simply adjusted the pay-to-play fees and schedule. However, to include a lot of the other activities that there may be a fee involved is proving to be, that portion is proving to, you know, create some difficulties. So I feel confident that we'll be able to come up with a good recommendation for the board to be able to adjust that. Again, I really would like to include the additional activities. However, you know, there just seems to be a lot of again, detail-oriented things that just take something that's, again, an easy idea and makes it difficult. So just from an accounting perspective or in a legal perspective to a degree. So again, all efforts are being made to make sure that we include as many in that discussion and help as many as possible, above and beyond just simply addressing the extracurricular fee structure if possible. If we can't, we can't, and then, you know, if the board doesn't support that, you know, they don't. But at the end of the day, that conversation is being looked into as much as we possibly can. And if anybody else has any additional input, I'd be happy to go through that discussion if anybody else had any questions or any additional input before we move that forward.
Okay.
Jason, just quickly, on the pay-to-play, you're looking at all the extracurriculars as far as like band, choral, like looking at all of the students that are, you know, students that are paying fees to see?
It would be right now just the individuals on the pay-to-play fee schedule that's identified. So
looking more at athletic.
you know, everything that's charged through the athletic office to bring, again, that fee structure into a median. We don't charge, my understanding is, we don't charge, the school doesn't charge to be a part of band, for example, or those other activities. So again, there are, of course, fees associated with that activity and extracurricular activity, but again, it's more to address the fees that the school are charging the kids to be able to participate in that particular activity.
Gotcha.
So example, the school doesn't charge, a kid to be in band, as an example.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments or things you want to talk about? No? All right, moving on to comments from the public. Doug Garrison.
I've got nothing. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to board member comments. We'll start with Mrs. Maddox Smith.
I really don't have many comments. I just think we're doing a lot of good work here. I really like the committee of the whole and just the open discussion. I like the transparency, and we're just getting all of the information at the same time. I think things are going well.
Mr. Zdunek.
Thank you for your time in putting this together, just all the folders, the 3-hole punches. It takes time to do that. So thank you. Thank you for doing it.
Ms. Ray.
Ditto. I appreciate all this, so thanks.
Mrs. Clip.
Yeah, thanks for your great leadership, and we are chipping away at some things that I think need to be chipped away at, slow but surely.
Mr. Hewitt,
No further comments, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Sarka.
As passionate as people were about the nickname and getting rid of the nickname and keeping the nickname and back and forth, it's been interesting to see how passionate people are about the new nickname and how much creativity has gone into this. There's some great names. Like I said before, there's some names that are, they're trolling, and that's what people are going to do. But I think the output has been great, and it's very interesting to see all the possibilities that to look forward to in the district. I don't know how I got a purple one. I'm not voting for Vikings if that's what is implied by this, but I appreciate all your work. Thank you.
All right, board, actually, no, there isn't board president comments. That's all right.
An oversight.
It's fine. It's fine. I don't need to say it.
So that, my apologies, Chris.
No, that's fine. Some of you have purple because that's all I had at home, so just deal with it. All right, announcements and other meetings. December 5th, 2023, Bothwell Band Winter Concert at Kaufman at 6:30. December 6th, 2023, the MSHS Band's Winter Concert at Kaufman at 6:30. December 11th, 2023, MSHS Choral Concert, Winter Concert at Kaufman at 6:30. December 18th, 2023, board meeting here in the library at 5:30. And then we will be, I'll need a motion to recess to close session.
I'll make a motion to recess to closed session.
Second.
All right, motion made by Mr. Hewitt, support by Mrs. Maddox Smith. Roll call, please.
Glenn Sarka,
Aye, yes.
James Hewitt,
Yes.
Jennifer Cliff,
Yes.
Jennifer Ray,
Yes.
Cheryl Maddox Smith,
Yes.
Jason Zadunik,
Yes.
Kristen Kambenzi.
Yes. All right, so we will recess to close session.